About having learned about virtualization, welcome to this second part here, which is now talking about automation. How do we automate our network services? Okay, how do we automate the provisioning of our routers, our switches? How do you automate the provisioning of our storage? Okay, just like when I open them, when I open my browser, and I did work on the let me just show that to you. When I worked on my browser here, and I was working on my Google Colab, and when I did work on my Google Colab right here, and I actually requested to be allocated here, and I was automatically allocated here. I was automatically allocated 12.68 GB of RAM and 107.72. So how am I automatically allocated that kind of memory? All right. The other thing to note is when you create a Gmail account, all right, you realize that Gmail gives you 15 free GB of storage capacity, 15 free GB of storage capacity. How does Google manage to allocate everyone that amount of GB space? All right, and so that's what we want to talk about today. We want to look up about what is cloud computing. We talk about, what is an API, and then we talk about something called Cisco DNA, which is very much connected to virtualization. And we will talk about, all stuff around automation. What is an API? And I'll give some basic definitions of APIs, and I will also be able to, basically just demonstrate using very familiar examples of what an application programming interface and what an API could do to you. And so this is a very remarkable class. And the other thing I want to mention is that the world is becoming more and more virtualized. And so should you. You need to learn how to handle this virtual machine. You need to know how to automate processes. One of the examples that I'm going to be giving you is, why do you have, for example, flight agents, flight booking agents, all right? How is it that when you book a flight by yourself, you can visit every website of every flight company? For example, if it is British Airways, if it is the South African Airlines, if it is, the Kenya Airways, for example, if it is the Ethiopian Airlines, how come you as an individual, you're not an agent, a travel agent? You can only visit each and every website at a time. But for the flight agents or flight travel or booking agents, they can actually make just one search, and that single search is gonna bring for them feedback or bookings from different website of flight databases. All right, and what we don't always know is that they actually use application programming interfaces, or what we otherwise known as APIs. They use APIs, all right? And that is one of those that we are going to talk about this evening. So talking about automation, we are going to explain how network automation is enabled through one of the APIs that is called the RESTful APIs, the representational state transfer APIs. And we'll also look at some configuration management tools. We'll look at some programming languages that is used in automation, and we'll also look at some of the network management tools. You and I know that when we go to do our labs, in most cases, we need our routers and switches. And then on the routers and switches, you need to connect a console cable on each and every device, each router, each switch, and you need to open the PuTTY or the Teraterm application, and then you need to initiate the connection and have access to the operating system of the router. Ladies and gentlemen, you can only configure enough devices when using that method, all right? Where you have to log into each and every device, each router, each switch, each firewall. What if you could automate the process of configuring these devices? How will life look like for you? Maybe you are working in a service provider network as a staff, as a network admin. And so your work is to manage thousands and thousands of equipment, deploy them, maintain them, all right? How can you do all this process automatically using some few programming skills and using automation? And, it means, therefore, that this kind of thing we're studying here, and this is a concept that Cisco introduced in CCNA version 7, because it never used to be there in CCNA version 6 and CCNA version 5, all right? And so there's a new course that was previously released by Cisco called the DevNet Associate. Now, the DevNet Associate course is a course that trains someone to not only be a network administrator, but also be a developer, a network developer. So you can write small scripts which can actually be used to automate the operations of a network. For example, you want to configure the IP addresses on your devices. You want to configure SSH, for example, just by a click of a button or using one piece of code. Okay. So one piece of code, you can actually let's close. You can actually be able to just push one piece of code and it will automatically configure all your devices. All right. So that is very, very important for you. Now, of course, we'll describe automation. We'll compare data formats here. We have the JSON data format, we have the YAML data format, and we have the XML data format. We'll also explain how APIs, the application programming interfaces, how do they enable computer-to-computer communications. We'll thereafter look at how the REST API enables computer-to-computer applications. And we'll explain, I will compare the configuration management tools, and including Puppet. We have the Chef here, we have Ansible, and we have the SaltStock. So we look at then the overview of automation. And at this point in time, what I want to do is that, let me just put off this video to give us enough focus and what we are talking about. So I need you guys to just focus on the screen here. So these are some of the benefits of automation. You and I know that a machine can work for 24 hours a day without taking a break, and it will give very uniform results. It'll never get tired, all right? And then that is part of automation, okay? And you can write a code which automatically collects data and quickly analyze it within the cloud and give you some output, right? Automated. You heard of a robot. We have robots which can be used to work in very dangerous situation or save lives in a mining field or firefighting players or in an industrial accident, and this reduces risks to humans. You've heard of nowadays in photography we use what is that we use again in photography to take aerial photographs? We use drones, okay? We use drones in taking aerial photograph of a very massive group of people, or could be a war going on, or it could be for weather forecasting. So we use drones a lot to do that, and these are part of automation. And under some circumstances, Some smart devices can always alter the behavior to reduce energy usage and make medical diagnosis or improving automobile driving safety. And you've heard of driverless cars with Google. You've heard of smart houses, um, smart doors, smart gates. You've heard of smart uh, wardrobes, smart everything. All right. And so most of these things have actually been automated by adding a programmable layer for it to be able to respond to the environment. Now, so this can be very simple as the smart appliances we find within our devices, or very complex as far as self-driving cars. Okay. Now, whenever any device can take any course of action based on an outside effect or information, then we refer to that device as smart. Okay. And so these smart devices, they could interact with the environment, take some weather or due to weather changes, and they have the ability to alter their behavior depending on what is the output of the environment or the nature of the environment. And so these devices, we refer to them as thinking devices. We refer to them as thinking devices. Now, let's look at some data formats here that we do have at our disposal that are normally used when you need to program the surface of these particular gadgets. So basically, a data format is simply a way of storing and exchanging data in a structured format. Okay. One of those formats, of course, is the HTML, the hypertext markup language, which is a standard language for describing structures for web pages. Now, the common data formats that we use in many applications within automation and network programmability include these three. We have the JSON, which is JavaScript object notation, JSON. We have XML, which is the extensible markup language. And then finally, we have a funny one, very funny indeed. Why am I calling it funny? I call it funny because YAML here, the first letter still refers to whole the whole abbreviation here. So YAML actually means YAML ain't markup language. They've never told us what this Y means. This Y basically still means the whole word YAML. All right. I don't know why they do that. Okay. So these are some of the data formats that are very common in terms of uh, uh, creation of some of these APIs in automation. So data formats come with certain rules, and some of these rules are rules that are used within every programming language. And so there must be syntax, and this syntax could include brackets, square brackets, normal brackets, curly brackets, quotations, commas, white spaces, or indentations, right? And objects are found within these particular data formats as rules. They could be characters, strings, lists, and even arrays. Okay. Some of these rules also include key and value pairs as a manner in which data is actually represented. Okay. And so looking at these data formats, we have them here. We have JSON, we have YAML, and we have XML. And looking at them, there's a very clear difference between these three data formats. At a glance, you can see that JSON has, these opening curly brackets and closing curly brackets must be there. And then there's key and value pair here. We have a message between quotation marks. There's a colon, and then there's success. So the message is the key and the value is success. The timestamp here is the key, and the time that we see here is actually the value, so on and so forth. We see the same thing in YAML. YAML doesn't have the curly bracket. It's actually a bit simpler. YAML just uses a colon to separate the keys and values. Okay, a bit of indentation here, so on and so forth. Then the XML has what is called tags up the open and closing tabs, and XML is actually very close to the HTML, which also uses these tags here. All right. Now, JSON as a data format is very human readable, used by applications for storing, transferring, and even reading data. It's very popular and normally used by web services and APIs to provide public data. And this majorly is because it's easy normally to parse or to read, and can be used with most modern programming languages. And that includes Python as a very common programming language. YAML is just another type of human readable data format, and also used for by applications for processing, storing, and even reading data. It's a super one than JSON. It has minimal format, and that makes it very easy to both write and read. And it uses indentation to define its structure without the use of any brackets or any columns of that kind. So YAML, like I said, normally if you compare the JSON and YAML is a bit much easier to read, and just using hyphens to separate each element within a network. And one of the things, if you look very keenly to the data formatting here, you can actually, from your previous understanding of CCNA, you can actually deduce that what's happening here is that this is an data format being used within an application programming interface to automate the process of configuring IP addresses on an interface. And you can see the interface is actually called Gigabit Ethernet 2. And the description is wide area network. You can see on both the two formats. And it's enable, you say true. And the IP address is here. IPv4 is here. And the subnet mask is here. And, this another IP address, this might be on a different device, I think so. An IP address 0.3, and there's another one on 0.4. So this can actually be pushed on 3 different devices, which is going to configure their interface called Gigabit Ethernet 0/2. So you realize you do just press this one piece of code, and you configure all your 3 devices together at the same time. So the last one is the XML data format, which is one of the types of human readable data format, also used to store, transfer, and read data by applications. So it's a standardized markup language for creating web pages and web applications, and it is always self-descriptive using the tags, all right? Now, we can see the XML, of course, having the tag thing there, and we can also see that the same IP addresses which were being configured on these devices are actually right here. So the same thing being done for using 3 different data formats. Now let's talk about an API, which is basically an application programming interface. And so talking about an API, I would like to relate an API, which is basically a software that allows different applications to access data and services, okay? And so it can be used to exchange data between different applications. So let's simulate an API to what happens within a restaurant. So you go to a restaurant, you are a customer here, and then the moment you get there, of course, the waiter is gonna come to you, and the waiter comes, the waiter is gonna ask you, or you're gonna ask him, what are you having for lunch or for dinner tonight or today? And the waiter is the only person who, of course, whose job is to inquire what is available in the kitchen, what food is available in the kitchen, and come back and tell you that, we're having chicken biryani, we're having mandondo for beans and chapatis, we're having some stew, you're having some, all those kind of foods that we have there. Okay. So you will then tell the the waiter, could you please, get me some, meal of your favorite, and the waiter is gonna bring that back. So we gonna the customer who is you, we is our user who consumes the APIs. The waiter is actually the API, the application programming interface, and what is available in the kitchen is actually the data or application that you need to request for. All right. So the user uses an API to place an API call to make a request to the to an application and bring you back the service that you need there. All right. And so that's how APIs actually work. So it's similar to a waiter in a restaurant, like we have seen there. Yeah. So you can ask for any type of information from a server, for example, and you'll receive the response in turn from a server along with the requested information. I'll give another example. Is this is you. You want to travel to the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, and you decide to check different flight databases. So you check at Fly Emirates. This is the Fly Emirates. Put your departure city, put your destination city, departure date, and the return date here. And you go to this database for United Arab Emirates, right? And you realize what the prices are, for the returning flight, what are the times, what are the, the cost of travel. And you're like, okay, let me make a comparison. So you leave this, you erase all the details you entered on your browser, and you go to, for example, the go to South African Airlines, for example, and then you compare the prices, and then you have to log out, and then you need to go again to Ethiopian Airline, and you go to the Pride of Africa, which is the Kenya Airlines, and so you make all these configuration, comparisons from from one database to the other. You do not have the ability to get all this information from the three websites at a glance. So what do? You don't want to go to the you don't want to go to the travel agent because they're gonna pick some commission from that. So you decide to do it alone. Now, what if you seek the services of an agent? And this is what the agent is gonna be doing. For the agent, they can input your departure city and your destination city and your departure date and returning date. And they can be able to get all the flights, all the airlines with the outgoing flights and the times and the costs and the name of those airlines at a time and at a glance. And what they do is that they use what's called application programming interfaces to do all this, to return all the results that they need there. And that's how they're able to make a comparison at a glance. So that is basically another very good example of an application programming interface. Okay. Now, let's look at one of the APIs, and we call this a REST API, a representational state transfer API. And an API that is using REST architecture is actually called a RESTful API. So RESTful APIs, or whatever that is normally used within, this is an API used with the HTTP or HTTPS. So we know that the web browsers use HTTPS, GET request, and a successful request will always give you a code of 200, okay? Now, the REST API is actually an API that works on top of the HTTP or HTTPS protocol, okay? And it normally defines a particular, I'm in a meeting class. Okay. Okay. All right. So it defines a set of functions and that developers can actually use to perform some requests and receive responses through the HTTP protocol. Okay. So any API that conforms to the REST architecture, like I said, is called a RESTful API. And what is composed of the RESTful API again? It works on a client and server basis, where the client handles the front end and the server handles the back end. All right. It is stateless. Stateless means there's no client data that's normally stored within the server. And it's cacheable. Cacheable. Its clients can store or cache responses to improve the performance, basically using cookies. Now, so normally a RESTful API using HTTPS will use the following methods, and we always call it the CRUD, okay? So the CRUD basically means create, read, update, and delete. So the HTTP method for creating any stuff within the web server is called the post. Then if you need to request for information, read for REST API within the HTTP method, it's called the get. If you need to update methods within RESTful API as an operation, we use the put or patch, all right? And then delete is just delete. So these are just some of the common HTTP methods, as well as corresponding RESTful operations that are used here. Now, there are three components, and this is part of software-defined networking, which can be used as part of resource request. So we have what's called the URI, URN, and URL. And so the URN basically is the uniform resource name. The URL is the uniform resource locator, and the URI is the uniform resource identifier. So the URN basically identifies only the namespace of a resource, right? Only the name space of a device. And the URL basically now defines the network locations of a specific resource. So for example, looking at a URL, we can see here that we have the, SFTP /sftp.example.com. So it only defines the location, the exact location, and you can see example.com, the exact location of a specific resource. The URI will actually give us everything, okay? So URI will be something like HTTPS, colon, /www.example.com, author /book.html on page 155. So that will be a URI. So a URI basically is a string of characters that identify a specific network resource. Now, looking at a URI, whatever we have seen up there, URI must have what's called a protocol scheme, must have what's called the host name, which is the domain name, the path and file name of where the resource is, and then the specific fragment might be like a specific page. So looking at it from an API point of view, we can actually look at this particular format here, where we have the API server is right here, okay, which is the URL for the server that answers the request of the API. We have the resource that is being requested for, and that is actually, we're requesting for directions or routes there. That's the resource. The query, which basically specifies the data format and information the client is requesting for, and you can see that here. This is the suggestion key here. We're requesting this from San Jose in Monterey in California. The format is usually either the JSON or could be YAML or whatever that is, the key formats. It's important to know the keys. This is basically used for authorization, all right? For authorization. And this is used to validate every kind of request. Of course, the parameters. The parameter used to send information pertaining to the request, okay? And so you can see that by the, from the San Jose, California to Monterey, California. So looking at part and parcel of the key which we have here is that normally the API key is very, very important, and it's majorly used, one, to authenticating the resource to make sure that only an authorized API requested, limiting the number of people that is using the API, limiting the number of requests per user, and better capture and track the data being requested for by the user. And finally, to gather information on the people using that API for better performance, and to like what cookies do, to better improve the API. So that is a bit of an anatomy of the API. Now, most websites and applications use APIs to access information and provide services to their clients, all right? So some of the RESTful APIs can be made by just typing on a URL from within a web browser, okay? And so we have this kind of API, which is called the map request direction, requesting from map, a request for some particular directions. And the request can also be made in other ways. It could be a developer website, where developers maintain some websites that include information about an API. It could be from a Postman perspective, which is basically an application used for testing and using of the REST APIs. It could be through a Python, and Python as a programming language used for calling this application using the Python programming language. Or it could be through a network operating systems like the netconf for network configurations, and restconf, where network operating systems could be used to provide alternative methods for configuring, monitoring, and management of our devices. So these are some of the use cases for REST API applications. I finally want us to look at configuration management tools. Now, to start us off on the configuration management tools, it's important to look at how things used to be. Okay. Now, the thing is, for a long time, we, the network administrators, have traditionally managed our devices. Okay. So you will basically sit down on a table like this on your laptop, have a console connection, or using SSH, then you log into your routers, log into your switches, log into your firewalls, and all that. Now, whenever there's any change that you need to make, you needed to do it manually. This is the traditional way of doing things. Now, this shouldn't be happening anymore. And we now need, of course, there are a few developments that have been made. We talked about the other day of now improving that a little bit and using the SNMP, or through the network management system. So use an SNMP whereby you can be able to send some traps and to your devices, so you can still manage your device through a network management system using the SNMP protocol. Okay. This is still not typically used for configurations because of security concerns and difficulty in implementation, because we know that SNMP uses security strings, and community strings, and these community strings are just plain text passwords, and this could still be able to jeopardize our network. So we are slightly moving towards APIs, which we will be using to automate one, the deployment, two, the management of our network and network resources, so that instead of manually configuring your ports, access control list, quality of service, load balancing policies like Ether channels, you can just use some application tools to be able to automate for you these configurations. And looking at tools like Puppet and Chef and SaltStock and Ansible, and the data formats like JSON and XML. Python as a programming language, very popular here. Netconfig, JSON, RPC, OpenStack. We are rapidly moving away from a world where you, as an admin, you manage a frozen dozen of network devices to where you just deploy and manage thousands and thousands of devices, whether physical or virtual, with the help of software. And so this transformation is quickly spreading to everywhere in the network. And there are new and different methods for network administrators, including you guys, to automatically monitor, manage, and configure your network. And so this is what we are calling upon you guys to start emulating, because the world is moving. So these tools, they make very good use of our APIs to make requests to make some of these tasks and to scale our configurations through thousands of devices. Okay. And so some of the ways in which we, the network administrators, will benefit is one is software and version control. This is for programmers. Device attributes like configuring names of IP addresses, securities like access control is configuring dynamic hosting protocols, OSSF, EIGRP, BGP, so on and so forth. And so these tools, they come with automation and orchestration tools. And the automation will automatically perform tasks within your systems. And this is going to make work very easy for us. So there are several tools that are available to make configuration management easier for you. And your goal is actually to reduce the complexity and the hours and hours involved in configuring and maintaining large pool of network infrastructure with hundreds and even thousands of configurations on your devices. So these tools, you can use them on a smaller network and even on larger networks. So tools like Ansible, tools like Puppet, tools like Chef, tools like SaltStock here. And here is a table where we want to make a small comparison of these tools in terms of which programming languages they use. Are they agent-based or agentless? How devices are going to be managed, and what is what infrastructure is created by this tool. So to start with, we're going to talk about Ansible. And Ansible uses Python as a programming language. Chef uses Ruby as a programming language, and so is Puppet. And then SaltStock uses Python. So Ansible can use Python and YAML as well. Now, for whether it's agent-based or agentless, the other day when we were talking about agentless and agent-based, we realized that the SSL VPNs, which you use within the browsers, and the IP security VPNs, which is used within an application. Okay, so an agentless VPN is actually a VPN. An agentless as a tool here is a tool which does not have applications. You actually do it just through the browser, and it doesn't have any application for it. That's agentless. So Ansible is agentless. Chef is agent-based, and Puppet is both agentless and agent-based, and SaltStock also supports both. How are these devices managed? Ansible manages devices using what's called a controller. So any of the devices can actually be a controller. Chef creates what is called a chef master, and Puppet creates a puppet master. And SaltStock actually uses what is called a salt master. What is created by these tools? So these tools within the device, Ansible will create a playbook, and Chef will create a cookbook. Puppet creates a manifest, and SaltStock creates a pillar. So some of these are just you know uh, comparisons that we are having for these particular tools. Now, finally, we want to talk about the last bit of this conversation. We call it IBN, and the DNA. And basically, IBN basically means the intent-based networking. So what is an IBN? So IBN, which is intent-based networking, is a very new emerging technology within the industry for the next generation of networking. Okay. And so what IBN does is that it builds a software-defined networking, which is going to be transforming the hardware part and the manual way of operating our networks into a software-centric and fully automated infrastructure. And that is very, very important. So we want to transform the whole of the network from hardware and manual approach of designing and operating the network into a fully software-based and automated network. Okay. And so what we want to do is that we want to express our business objectives into intentions for the network. All right. And what IBN, the intent-based networking, is gonna be doing is that it's going to capture, IBN is gonna capture these intentions, and using data analytics and machine learning and automation, it's gonna be aligning the network continuously and dynamically to meet these business needs that we need it to achieve. All right. So express your intentions, check them through algorithms of machine learning and data analytics and automation, and align this business intention continuously and dynamically to achieve the businesses that we have within the network. Okay, so we translate the intentions into network policies, and then we automate them and continuously collecting information from the data using and analyzing it using machine learning to do the work for that. So what you realize is that this kind of network becomes more and more smart network. All right. And that is the intent-based networking, a network that expresses your intentions. Now Cisco views IBM as having three essential functions, and we have the functions of translations, activation, and assurance. All right. And all these functions interact with the underlying physical infrastructure and virtual infrastructure. And the part of the translation basically enables the network administrator, who is you, to express the expected networking behavior, which will best support the business intentions. That is the translation function. Or what the activation function of the network does is that with the captured intentions, this needs of interpreting the policies which can be applied across the network and installing these policies into the physical and virtual network infrastructure using automation. And so to continuously check that the intentions is being honored by your network at any point in time, we are going to continuously collect data using data analytics, okay, and analyze that data using artificial intelligence and machine learning in order to continuously validate and verify the loop so that it's a continuous circle of events within our network. And that is something very, very important. So it becomes a continuous loop from the translations to assurance, okay, down to the machines, the physical and the virtual infrastructure here. And we activate those intentions here, and the assurance, of course, collect information. And the circle is a circle that is continuously flowing. And this is to make sure that, the result is a continuous result within the whole network. And so it's a cycle of events between translations to activation to assurance. Now, then Cisco comes with what's called DNA, the digital network architecture. Okay. So in implementing the intention-based networking, Cisco uses what is called the DNA, the digital network architecture. And in this part of the what the DNA is that this type of deployment, the business intentions is going to be securely deployed within the network infrastructure fabric that is within our devices. Okay. So in order to securely deploy this, the Cisco DNA is going to continuously gather data uh, from a multitude of resources, and that is from our routers, switches, from our applications, and provide a very rich context of information after analysis. So continuously gather and analyze that data. And then once the analysis is done, this is going to make sure that the network is performing very securely. So this is a security element, and the network is not just operating securely, but also the network is working at an optimum level and in accordance with the business intentions and network policy. So we introduce a security element so that we are keeping hackers away from this network, keeping malware from this network, because this is everything is being done within a very secure environment through continuous collection of data within their network. Now, Cisco provides different solutions for the Cisco DNA. So we have the SDN access solution, which is a fast internet-based enterprise networking solution. Normally, this is normally built within the local area network and the wireless local area network to create very consistent and highly secure user experience. And it could segment the users, devices, and the applications traffic and automate the access within them. And so the benefit of this is that it enables the network access in just minutes for any user or any devices to any application without compromising the security. So the SD access is for LAN and the WLAN. Then you have the SD1, which uses very secure cloud delivered infrastructure or architecture to centrally manage our wider network connections. Okay, so it accelerates delivery of very secure and flexible and reach one services to connect data centers, branch networks, campus networks, and the co-location facilities. And the benefit of this is that it delivers better user experience for applications that reside within the on-premises and even within the cloud. And of course, it achieves a greater agility and cost-effective and easier deployment within the network. Of course, we have other solutions like the Cisco DNA Assurance, which is used to troubleshoot and to increase IT productivity, and it applies advanced analytics and machine learning to improve performance and issue resolutions within the network. The benefit of this is that it allows you to identify some of the root causes within the network and provide very faster remedies within your network. It also provides an easy to use single dashboard with insights and drill down capabilities. And the machine learning will continuously improve the network intelligence and predicting some of your network problems before they actually occur. Finally, as a solution is the Cisco DNA security, which is normally used to provide visibility by using the network as a sensor for real-time analysis and intelligence of your network problems. And so it also provides an increased control to enforce the organizational policy and containing threats across your network. And the major benefit of this is that it reduces the risk in protecting your organization against any kind of threats, even if the traffic is encrypted. And it gives you a 360-degree visibility in a real-time analytics for deep intelligence across your network. And finally, of course, it lowers the complexity with what's called the end-to-end security. So the Cisco DNS Center is basically a foundational controller and analytics platform which supports the expression of intent for multiple use cases. So it's this kind of dashboard gives you an overall health summary of your network and a network snapshot from wherever you as a network administrator can quickly access it. Now, of course, the DNS Center basically looks like this at a glance, and at the top are menus, about 5 of them, including the design, for the entire network. It provides the sites and the buildings and the WAN infrastructure, cloud, virtual, so on and so forth. There's part of the policy, which uses policies to automate and simplify network management and in terms of reducing cost and even risks. The provision allows for provision in new uses, new devices, speeds, and even security across your enterprise network. The assurance uses productive monitoring and insights from the network and the devices and applications within your network. The platform uses, of course, application programming interfaces to integrate with their preferred IT systems to create end-to-end solutions, and of course, supporting even multi-vendor devices. So this is basically the end of this chapter on automation. There's a couple of new things here, new technologies. And so if you want more and more, experience with automation and even have hands-on experience, the DevNet Associate course is a very good example at this point, where you'll be able to feel the translations, all the automations, and you'll be able even to work on digital labs that Cisco provides within developer.cisco.com website, which is free for all of you guys. So please take advantage of the new recently launched course by Cisco, the DevNet Associate course, and you're gonna learn a lot. Free infrastructure in that course. And the good news is that that course is actually being offered at Kenyatta University. And I was one of the first instructors for DevNet Associate in the country, and you could take advantage of that as well. All right. So I guess that brings us to the end of the CCNA course. And at this point in time, I would definitely would like to advise you guys to basically begin the preparation for your industrial exam. And I also need to mention the fact that this particular end of CCNA 3 opens the ground for you. This should not be the end of everything for you. And what I want you to do is that I now want you to prepare for the CCNA certification practice exam. Now, the CCNA is an industrial certification, the Cisco Certified Networking Associate certification. Ladies and gentlemen, the CCNA, I think in Africa and, I don't know about the other continents, for a long time, I have been rated so highly. Under my instruction, or most of my students, better than all the other instructions, I have trained most of students who went ahead and passed their CCNA certifications. In the year 2022 alone, I had over 70 students who finished their CCNA course, and they went ahead and did their certifications, and they actually passed their industrial certifications. All right. And this year, I'm also aiming to reach at 100 of my students within the year who not only finished their CCNA CCNA course, but go ahead and take their industrial certification very seriously and actually pass it, right? The CCNA is not a very tough course, and of course, I'll be doing a video on the YouTube channel on the some of the tips of passing the CCNA certification. And it's not a hard course. It's an exam that normally has theory and practical. And one of the things that is very important for you is that Cisco, at the end of the CCNA 3, like we just finished today, Cisco gives you a voucher. But how do you get the discount voucher? You get the discount voucher upon you get the discount voucher upon passing with a 75% and above on your final exam on the first attempt. And that is something you need to note there, okay? on the first attempt, when you pass the final exam on first attempt with a pass rate of 75% and above, Cisco is going to give you a 58% discount voucher on the exam, such that you won't have to pay. You will only pay 42%, and Cisco will pay the other remaining 52% for you. Okay, so take advantage of this certification, and for you to be able to go and pass this exam. Okay, so the CCN exam, the CCNA certification exam, is just one of the certifications, and I could give you an overview of the what is required within the CCNA exam. I'm just trying to open the exam. Normally, the exam topics, which are basically here. So the exam topics that you need to study, we have here network fundamentals here, which take about 20% of the exam. Network access, which takes another 25. IP connectivity takes 25%. IP services take 10%. Security and fundamentals take 15%. Automation network programmability takes another 10%. And if I open this, the network fundamentals include things like the routers, layer 2 and layer 3 switches, the next generation firewalls and IPS, access points, the LAN controllers within wireless, endpoint servers, PoE, the 2-tier, 3-tier spine leaf we talked about today, one, the SOHO networks, the on-premises and the cloud we talked about today, the fiber, single mode fiber, multi-mode fiber, the different connections, point-to-point Ethernet, TCP, UDP. You realize some of these things are things we have talked about, IPv4 and subnetting, describing the private IPv4, IPv6, the types of IPv6 are here. The SSID, this for wireless principles, virtualization containers, server virtualization we talked about today, market-based learning, aging framework, market-based table, all those are part of network fundamentals. Then we go to the network access, where we have things like the VLANs, inter-VLAN routing, trunks, native VLANs. We have the Ether channels here, root bridge stuff, port fast, and all that. APIs and the wireless LAN controllers, TACACs, wireless LAN creation and settings. That is that. Then we have the connectivity, and here we have the routing protocols, prefix, network subnet mask, administrative distances, metrics, gateway of last resort, longest march, AD, routing protocols, matrices, default routes, network routes, host routes, host routes, floating routes, neighbor adjacencies, point-to-point, the designated router and the BDR, router IDs, functions for redundancy protocols. Then we have the IP services. Here we have a couple of services: DNS, DHCP, NTP, NAT, SNMP, DHCP, client and relay, QoS, SSH, TFTP, and FTP. The security fundamentals include things like, threats, vulnerabilities, and exploits, security programs, device access control, IP security, we talked about that, layer 2 security features like dynamic ARP inspection, DHCP snooping, WPA2 for wireless, LAN, PSK, and all that. And finally, the 10% is on automation and programmability. We explaining the terms of and management of how automation takes place, northbound APIs and southbound APIs, separation of the control and data plane. We talked about that today. Overlay configuration of device management services, REST APIs, and the CRUD, JSON as a data format, Puppet, Chef, these management tools, and that is gonna form the the 200-301 CCNA exam. And so this is not a very hard exam for you guys, and I want to encourage all of you guys, after you take your final exam, make sure that Cisco will definitely give you a voucher. So work very hard to get this voucher and go and take this. Why am I telling you to take industrial certification again? It's because Cisco majorly uh, wants you to be certified, because employers are looking for people with some of these employability skills. And these employability skills, on top of your diploma or your undergraduate degree or your master's, you need to have employability skills. And these ones are only certified once you take your industrial certification. So I would encourage you again to work very hard towards your certifications, and that will be a very good thing for you. Otherwise, I think this will be a very important part as the end of CCNA, and all this, of course, will be available on the YouTube channel there.